Hello, I'm going to present information about the Statewide Incident Management Program. Through this presentation, you'll understand the purpose of the program, the applicable policies and procedures and standards which created the program, the responsibilities and the roles of the parties involved, the department's reporting, as well as our office. Then I'll go into more detail about the definition of an incident, as well as the criteria of when an incident should be reported. Toward the end, I'll show an incident response life cycle in terms of how an incident should flow in terms of when it happens to the time it closures. And then I want to touch on the incident reporting process, which is also referred to as Cal-CSIRS. The purpose of an incident reporting program is to minimize and mitigate the loss and risk of state assets, specifically our IT assets, whether it be IT equipment, our information data, our electronic data that is owned by the state. It also helps establish accountability in terms of making sure that the department networks are up to a certain level of security standards. And then we're going to provide guidance on how to respond to incidents and what type of steps you can take to recover from the incident. And it depends on the type of incident it is or that you experience. We'll talk about some early warning detectors and some precursors that can happen on your network, which would signal you that something's about to happen. And then also we'll identify and address information security gaps. So all these things are benefits of what the program provides, and it's the purpose of the program. There are a handful of policies and procedures within the state of California that not only build the program, but to support the program, as well as give you guidance of how to interact and participate in the incident management program. The first manual that we reference is always the State Administrative Manual. There's detailed reference of where you can find incident management and security breach information in the SAM. The Statewide Information Management Manual also has more detailed steps of the incident reporting program, as well as how to report an incident in the 5340B, and then when your incident is a breach of privacy notifications and kind of what steps you need to take if information that has been taken is of personal nature. There's other standards. Again, I mentioned that it's not just about the State Administrative Manual and it's not just about the SIM, but on a national level or on a federal level, we're following the NIST standard, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That standard is used federally, not just for federal departments, but in terms of federal security and securing federal networks. The NIST policies listed there for more detail and for your own reference gives guidance of how we put this program together, modeled after that, as well as how incidents are handled by us. Follows the standards that were put out by NIST. The Federal Information Processing Standards is another guideline which we use to set up the program. Again, without going into details, just more of pointing out that not only is there categorization of different types of incidents, but there are some minimum requirements for your IT network that you should be following. And so we set those as a baseline and we follow those, and that's what we adhere to, and as there's changes to those, we roll those changes out to the state network and to the individual departments. So there's our office also. There's more than just the federal standards and the federal requirements, but then there's our office, which has a responsibility of running the incident management program statewide. There's also what's termed as Cal-CSIRS, which is the California Cybersecurity Integration Center. Right now that's housed out of the California Office of Emergency Services, and that was put together in August of 2015. The Cybersecurity Integration Center coordinates with the different departments, including CHP and the California Military Department, on any major cybersecurity incidents which attack or have encroached on any of the department networks, as well as city and local county governments. The California Highway Patrol is another entity that gets involved, especially if it's involved breach or some type of incident on California state property. The CHP is our law enforcement side that would become involved, and you'll see on the screen referencing both the Computer Crimes Investigation Unit as well as the NTAC services for emergency contact are all channeled through the California Highway Patrol. There are other departments that might have an interest depending on your incident and the type of incident. The Office of Health and Information Integrity, they get involved if the information that has been breached or taken has to do with health records. And then there's the California Department of Public Health, again, if personal medical information that we control or we're responsible for owning, if that has somehow been released, the Health Department would like to know. Secretary of State, Department of Finance, those other departments, again, they would engage depending on the type of breach that you have. For example, the Department of Finance may be interested if the amount of dollars or the amount of equipment stolen reaches a certain dollar threshold amount. It's not to say that all these departments would be involved every time you have a breach. It's just clarifying that depending on the type of breach and the magnitude of it, different departments become involved. And then last, you and your organization. When there is a breach within your network at your department, you are responsible for not only getting it reported, but working with the different organizations that you saw on the previous slide to make sure that your situation is mitigated and as well as your network is secure to at least the minimum standards or even higher, depending on the type of breach. Also, we'll walk through in a few slides later what you can do to help secure your network and to make sure that you are prepared for any type of IT cybersecurity breach. On this slide, I just want to clarify that the definition of an incident may be something that actually happened, or it could be something that is potentially a situation that could damage your network. You don't have to wait until the malware actually shows itself and proves that it's either causing some type of ransomware or damaging your network data or slowing your network communications. You don't have to wait till those things. If you see the malware on the network in a dormant state, it's still an incident that you need to figure out not only how it got there, you need to get it reported, you need to respond appropriately to make sure it's not only cleaned out in the one spot you found it, but how it got there to prevent and close the door of how it entered into your network. The underlined words there are the key words that an incident could have actually happened. You certainly should be reported. If it's potentially already on your network, although it's not doing damage and it's in a dormant state, that is also an incident. In an earlier slide, I pointed out that one of the guiding documents is the SIM 5340A. In that document, the SIM 5340A, it defines the Incident Management Program, and in the document further, it goes into detail of what type of incidents are reportable. I listed them off in a summary fashion of 1 through 6 here. I'll briefly clarify them. And then after clarifying them, I'll show how those relate in terms of the next steps of reporting them if they happen on your network. The first one is state data, electronic, paper, or verbal. If state information has been taken, whether it's been taken by theft or loss or unauthorized destruction, those are indicators that you've actually had an incident. The data could also have been modified inappropriately. The data that you're responsible for or your department is responsible for, if it has been acquired, and it doesn't matter if it's been acquired whether in an unencrypted or an encrypted state, the fact that they're there and they're taking the data is enough of a security breach that it should be reported. There's also criminal activity. If somebody has had unauthorized access into the system, or if you've had an outside hack or an outside attack onto your network, or if it's an internal attack from an employee. Again, there's activity on the network that might be at criminal level of activity, and that activity needs to be reported in Cal-CSIRS. There's also the more obvious of equipment theft and equipment damage and destruction. Those are IT equipment that needs to be monitored. They hold data, and so if any of the equipment has been damaged or stolen, it needs to be reported. Inappropriate use, and that's not just use of computer equipment for personal use, but also if you've used your work computer to circumvent network controls, or if you've used your desktop computer to access the network controls within the state to bypass some of the security policies in the state. That's an example of inappropriate use. So it's much more than just going out to the internet. Outages and disruptions over 2 hours. Many networks can go down for just a short period and it's not really an issue, and sometimes they're doing upgrades. But in general, if it's been over 2 hours, especially on a mission critical system, that would be a reportable item that should be reported in through Cal-CSIRS, as well as if you have a public-facing web page that your customers are logging into and reporting data. If that goes down for more than 2 hours, that would be a disruption in service or an outage that needs to be reported. And then finally, incidents that violate state entity information security or privacy policies. This one leans toward that, although we can list list off every criteria of what is a breach or an incident, your department may have even more stringent policies that you have to adhere to. So although we cover them in a broad state level, your specific department, depending on the type of data you are responsible for, may have even higher and more stringent rules that you have to adhere to. This slide is a screenshot, partially from the incident reporting system dubbed Cal-CSIRS. In another slide set, we go more into Cal-CSIRS and how to report an incident when it happens. But I pulled up this slide to indicate the 9 areas when you report your incident that it would fall under. These are the primary types of incidents that happen within the state, and when you do have an incident and it's being reported, it'll be one of the 9 listed on the right-hand side. The next few slides, I'm going to just summarize an incident response life cycle. The type of incident that you could have may not follow every step here. This specific life cycle is for a cybersecurity incident, such as a malware or a ransomware. The entire life cycle may not be relevant if you are reporting an incident such as a computer theft or a web page defacement. In either of those cases, all these steps may not apply. I chose this one because most of the steps can apply to a cybersecurity incident where a malware has been planted on your network. What you'll see on the next couple slides in terms of the preparation, the detection and analysis, the containment and eradication and recovery, and the post-incident activity. All these things happen, and they happen at different speeds, and they happen at different management levels, depending on the type of incident and how effective the malware or the ransomware has been into getting in the system, and also depends on how fast it was detected and the response reaction time to mitigate the malware and prevent further damage. In preparation and prevention, the 6 bullets listed there are summarized, and as we walk through each one of these, you'll see that there's a whole life cycle. Again, keep in mind that some of these steps may not apply depending on the type of incident you're reporting. So the incident handling plans and communication, as you saw on the previous slide, we have 9 types of incidents that fall into categories. And there should be at least a plan of how to handle each type of those 9 incidents. And that plan would include a communication plan when those incidents occur. Even departments will have a flight checklist. When a certain malware hits or a certain ransomware hits, they would go through this checklist to make sure everything is taken care of. There's also incident analysis hardware, if you have forensic analysis hardware to capture the image, and there's also being ready with spare hard drives around and backup images. Also, the mitigation plans and software are things like you have clean images of your operating system, as well as access to your archive files and your backup files, and not only access, but where are they, how far is your data backed up, and how quickly can the data be ported back to a clean system. There's prevention, are things like your antivirus software, your malware detection software, your host security and your network security systems that are running, and then understanding the various attack vectors. What that means is the 9 types of incidents shown on the previous slide, that there's different ways that your network can be attacked. You may not be an expert on each one of those methods of attack, but at least understanding at a high level how those attacks occur, how they came into your system, or how they will try to get into your system, and what is the best response for when those attacks happen. Again, you may not know every type of attack out there, but generally they come in through standard ports and their standard malware that you should expect. And then there is some preemptive activity that you should have, and that's before an attack happens. And so a preemptive strike, what I mean by that is just have your network measured. You should know the speed of your network. You should know not only the number of systems on your network, but you should know when backups are happening. You should know when there's a lot of bandwidth taken. So when there's some anomaly within your network, you may not detect it right away with malware, but you can tell that there's something not right working on your system. Along with the preemptive strike is to make sure that all your network clocks are synchronized, so when the logs capture events, each clock that it's looking at is on the same system. It's things like that, making sure your logs are capturing network activity and how far back you're setting, how far back your logs are keeping records, as well as what type of records are your computer logs keeping. All those fall under kind of a preemptive strike or before an attack happens. Under detection and analysis, the precursors and indicators are listed here from our NIST standard 800-61. I won't go over each one of them, but I do want to talk about the first two, the intrusion detection and prevention system, as well as the security information and event management system. Those are standard systems within a network. However, what is not standard is a lot of networks have those tools, but they're not turned on, or they're not turned on to an appropriate level of security. Although you can see the detection and analysis there, it's probably likely you have those items already on your network as standard tools. You should take the time to make sure that those tools are not only turned on, but what flags you have the tool set at. The other items such as file integrity, checking software, and third-party monitoring services, those are just ways to detect if something is changing on your network. So they're listed there as ideas for you to consider. Every network is slightly different. The ability to have some of these may not make sense, but look at the list as a consideration of something that you can do to detect when there's a change to your network. The last two on that list, though, are people from within your organization and people from other organizations. This ties into that the people on your network are people that might be the ones to tell you first that there's something wrong. Because as people work on their computers, even as they work on a wireless network within your building, if you have one, they'll be the first to notice that something doesn't seem right. So if there's kind of a buzz that something is going wrong on the network within your department, it's a pretty good sign that you should probably spend some investigative time to see what's happening on the network and why things are slowing down. The other one on people from organization, and that just ties into just networking with other departments, the other ISOs. If they see something happening on their network, it's probably just a matter of time until you see something very similar on your network. Under analysis, though, once you do have something found, whether it's a malware or some other type of ransomware, the first reaction is usually, of course, take the system offline if you can, or isolate that particular unit. If it's a virtual machine, again, just isolate it and remove it as soon as possible. But I do want to clarify, don't try to fix it in the sense of re-image the computer right away. You want to make sure that if you have a malware on there, you want to get an image of the computer. We want to give a chance for CHP as well as the Cybersecurity Integration Center. Take a look at the malware, find out what IP address it came in on, giving them a chance to do some analysis. A lot of departments react right away and try to re-image the computer, which is a good thing. You want to get the computer asset back up and running, but remember that the logs and the information and the details of the malware, we may want that for our analysis so we can better screen it out in the future, as well as to see where the malware may be calling out to, if it's sending data, as well as looking at the computer logs to see how the malware got into the system. So you do want to take the known infected system offline. It may be multiple systems. Shut down the system. Continue to check the rest of your network to see if you see similar flags on other computers. And then start your initial contact with Cal-CSIRS by starting to report the incident. By the time you detect it, you're already starting to isolate it. You're getting ready to make sure your network is as whole as possible, but you should at that time start your reporting process, report your incident in through Cal-CSIRS. You want to prioritize the incident. When I say prioritize it, in terms of how critical it is this just a minor malware that can be dealt with your own antivirus software system? Or is it a very malicious, and I'll just say complicated or fast-growing malware or self-replicating malware that you need assistance on? So you can put some priority on it. The priority you put on it would determine which departments you could call on for assistance and help with the situation. As I mentioned earlier, some departments have a flight checklist when they have activity, incidents, and similar activities happening on their network. So when those actions happen, make sure you check your flight checklist, go through your communication plan to make sure the right managers are aware. They're going to want to know the severity, and is it something that you have mitigated and contained, or if you need help from other departments, such as the CHP from the Cybersecurity Integration Center with assistance with the malware. Seek assistance from any of your peers in the ISO realm because they may have seen this issue already, and if you're contacting the Cybersecurity Integration Center, they can also hook you up with where that malware is not only in other state departments, but if it's being seen across the nation. After the detection and analysis, there's the containment, eradication, and recovery. The containment, meaning you would identify the affected hosts, identify the vulnerabilities that were exploited by looking at the malware and determining how it came into your system, looking at the computer logs, figure out which port it came in on, or which employee brought the thumb drive, or how it got into the system, and try to contain the problem from growing. And if it's an open port, you may need to close some of those open ports. Eradication means not just removing the malware and the related files it's calling out to, but disabling the breach user accounts if relevant, and mitigating the other vulnerabilities that were exploited. So there may be valid Microsoft or Macintosh OS files that are on there that have been altered and they stay within your systems. Those other vulnerabilities that have been compromised also need to be removed and taken out of the system. And then the recovery, I know there's always a press to get the system all up and running as fast as possible. Just from experience and from seeing a lot of these incidents, do it in phases, bring up one network at a time or bring up one section at a time. You want to recover it in a logical and a phased approach, just making sure that each system comes up individually. In recovery, it sounds like such a simple bullet, but a lot of times during the scramble to bring things back up, there's a lot of IT workarounds, administrative password bypasses to get the system up and running. Just make sure you retrace your steps to make sure that those workarounds that were put temporarily in place can be removed. And then returning your affected system to its ready state and confirm it's functioning properly. And then it may involve rebuilding your computer system from scratch, and a full recovery, depending on the size of your network and the amount of data. It may take several days to bring a network system up to full recovery if you're going from scratch. When you think about post-incident activity and the fire has been put out, it's best to keep reporting on the incident on an ongoing basis rather than waiting till the very end. If you have any required reports, which you'll have at least through Cal-CSIRS, be working on the reports throughout the incident, giving updates real time as appropriate, especially as systems are being rebuilt. Take time to go in and make sure your reports are updated. The Cal-CSIRS report is one of them, but depending on the type of data that's been compromised or possibly taken from your department or from your network, you may have other reports due to Cal-OHI or to Department of State auditors. Again, it depends on the severity, the magnitude, and the type of data that was taken. Take a moment after the reports are done, that lessons learned of how this incident happened. How did it originally get in? Are you looking at your network to see that this could not happen again? But also, not just the malware itself, but what steps were taken by your department, by your IT team, what steps were taken that slowed down the recovery process, and what steps could be taken to improve the communication and the recovery process. So kind of a lessons learned. It's not often we get to do the fire drill, so it's best if you never have to go through the incident, but when they do happen, reflectively look back to see how could you address these incidents in the future. Evidence retention, make sure this is your post-incident activity. You have evidence retention of your computer logs. Make sure your computer logs are still capturing their data. And how long do you want to keep the logs from the malware incident, as well as the computer images that were taken, whether by the CHP or by Cal-CSIRS or by your own department for your investigative services. So how long do you want to keep that information? And then finishing steps are just seeing what was used up at the time. Do you need to rewrite your TRP plan? Do you need to order more hard drives because you've used your supply? So with that, that would take you through the post-incident activity. That was just a summary of things that happen within an incident. Not every step is relevant depending on the type of incident you have. Pretty much it's covered in there that those are the cycle of steps that you would run through for an incident. Cal-CSIRS is the California Compliance and Security Incident Reporting System. It is the reporting system for your IT incidents for the state of California. If you're a California State Department, you report all your IT incidents through Cal-CSIRS. Initial release of Cal-CSIRS, your reporting system, is a reporting and tracking system to help you report your incidents as well as track them, as well as keep them logged for archive and for reporting purposes to your management. Cal-CSIRS is a web-based reporting system, and it's accessible from your browser, and it's accessible through Internet Explorer as well as Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. Cal-CSIRS replaced the Information Security Incident Reporting to the California Highway Patrol. So those of you that have been with the state for a while, when you had an IT incident, you normally would call NTAC. You'd call CHP, their NTAC department, and report your cybersecurity incident. So Cal-CSIRS has replaced that. You no longer have to go that route, but you do have to log into Cal-CSIRS through the web and report your incident. The CHP is still involved, and they see all the Cal-CSIRS reports that are submitted, and when they have more information or if they need clarification about your incident, they'll call you directly and ask you questions based on your report that you submitted in Cal-CSIRS. And again, Cal-CSIRS will help, but it will not replace your requirement to complete the Standard 152 or the Standard 99. The Standard 152 is required by DGS for loss of survey and equipment. The Standard 99 is criminal activity report, investigation activity report required by CHP depending on the incident. Those forms are still required, and you'll still have to complete those forms. My point of the last bullet is that Cal-CSIRS is a reporting system, and as you report into the system, it doesn't absolve you from your other requirements of submitting other reports to departments that need their information depending on the type of incident that you've incurred. In Cal-CSIRS, you'll submit your report into Cal-CSIRS through the web. There's a whole separate online presentation on how to create and submit an incident through Cal-CSIRS. But in general, you'll report your incident in Cal-CSIRS through the web. You'll initiate contact with the CHP or with our CISO office if necessary. You'll complete the report in Cal-CSIRS, respond to questions, and provide details as the incident is going and close it out. Once the incident closes in Cal-CSIRS, then the incident is closed. The last bullet there is you'll still need to update your department management, your executives, your senior managers about open and closed incidents, which may later become an oversight discussion. What that last bullet means, as in the previous process, you had to submit a 5340 for your managers to sign in Cal-CSIRS. Because it's all online, your management may not see all the incidents that are being reported and closed for your department. So you're still required, as you always have been, to keep your management informed of incidents that happen within your department's network. A couple of things about Cal-CSIRS. This is the Incident Management Program, and you report your incidents all through Cal-CSIRS if you're a state department. From feedback and from people that are using it, a lot of it is don't overthink it. You'll see some cells, there's questions that they're asking, there's some required fields that you should know and you should be able to answer. There's some other fields that are waiting for an answer. You don't have to complete every field, so don't overthink it. If you don't know the answer, you don't have to put in an answer if you really don't know it. Don't hold back submitting the report because a field may not yet be answered. Just submit what you can. If we have any questions, we'll contact you and there'll be some dialogue either with our office or with the CHP to get clarification of something you may not know at the time. Also, you may need to go back in later and fill in some of the answers that you didn't know at the time you submitted your incident. Another tip is try to de-identify or redact a lot of the personal information. It's enough to know an employee lost their laptop computer or their cell phone was stolen from their purse is enough detail. We don't need the name of the employee or we don't need the address of where the robbery took place. We're just reporting the incident. The CHP, if they want that level of detail, they'll contact you and they'll have a more private investigative questions directly with you. But for just reporting the incident and tracking the state data and tracking your incidents, just de-identify a lot of the personal information that may not be relevant to the actual incident. Certainly provide a corrective action. That's one area that we see a lot of blank space there. It's blank because at the time you may not know, but we can't close it till we have some type of corrective action to make sure that it won't happen again or what caused it has been prevented from happening again. Also toward the bottom, there's a question of cost of corrective action and the total cost financial loss to the state. Both of those questions are just estimates. We're not expecting you to contact accounting to figure that out, and it is not a number that you'll be audited on. It's just an estimate to get an idea of how much of an impact this incident had on your overall department. There's a worksheet at the website shown that you can use, but in general what people are doing is they're estimating the number of hours that it took and they multiply that by a dollar amount to get it resolved, plus they'll add in rough estimates of equipment and they summarize that and put that in. And that's the only level of detail we need. Again, you will not be audited on the number. It's just that we're trying to get a feel for the financial impact of the incident on your department. In Cal-CSIRS reporting tips, there's some additional steps when the breach has been a release of personal identifiable information. So if the state has information about a citizen and that information has been somehow taken from the state's control, then there are some additional steps for clarity party, you need to send a notification to the individual to let them know that their personal information has been released. There is more definition or clarification of the type of information that has to be released to reach that threshold of a notification. And on this slide, you'll see in kind of bullet point 1 is that if the individual's first name and their last name in combination with one of the items below, then you need to notify that individual that their information has been released. There are letter templates as well as instructions as well as guides of how to make that communication as well as to who in your department should sign the notification and what instructions you can give the citizen if this type of breach has happened. Also, a notification if a username and their email address in combination with a password and security questions, if those things have been released, that you are holding that information and the citizen uses that information to log in to the web page, and now that for some reason has been released, you'll have to notify the user right away that their personal email address and their password has been compromised. There's more details on that type of breach when it's a personal information release, and you can find that under the SIM 5340C. Take a look at that before the incident occurs. It gives more details. Just follow the expected and approved templates in the SIM 5340C. There are a good number of templates in the back of how to communicate the message to the citizen or multiple citizens. It's been a multiple breach of data. And then through Cal-CSIRS, you can receive your approval of the notice. We'll review it. We'll check it out just before it goes out. Just a reminder, again, these are reporting tips. When you send us your draft breach notification, again, you can redact the specific information. We don't need the name and address of the person who had their information breached. We don't need that level of detail. We're just looking at the content of the letter to make sure it contains the right message from your department to the citizen. And then finally, if there's a breach of over 500 names and passwords and private information, then there's some additional steps, because that size of a breach, you have to let the Attorney General's office know. There'll be a posting on a website when it's that large of a breach. So again, the state of California holds a lot of data. We're responsible for that data. When there's been a breach of the data, and it does happen, then you can follow these steps to not only report your incident, but to notify the citizen that their personal information has been released. There are still your other reporting requirements. The Cal-CSIRS is not your only deliverable when you have an incident. I mentioned that the CHP will require their standard 99 if it's a crime on state property. DGS may require their standard 152 if it's an asset by the state that you're tracking and it's now lost, and so it now needs to be surveyed out through the standard 152. And then Cal-OHI may need clarification and have their forms and reports filled out if health information has been taken from one of their state hospitals or the other programs that they manage.